Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Accessibility Jamboree. I'm Riley Clarke, PhD student at the University of Delaware, and I'm co-chairing the session with Alysha Shugart, who is joining us remotely. Alysha, do we want to go ahead and get started and remind everyone about the code of conduct?
Yeah, that sounds great. So hello, everybody. Please let me know in the chat or in the Slack channel if you can't hear me, I can speak up. My name is Alysha and my pronouns are she and they, and I'm going to be co-chairing this session today with Riley. So just some reminders about the code of conduct. We have agents of positivity there who are are advocates to uphold the code of conduct. So if you perceive anything that is out of line with respect to the code of conduct, you can talk to Rand Powell, John Franklin, or Agnes Verte. And of course, we have the indications about what kind of physical contact is allowable per person, and including the social battery pin. If you spot someone wearing a pin like that and it looks like it's a bit drained or kind of towards the red end or a frowny face, maybe initiate a conversation with that person at another time. Next slide, please. So other reminders for virtual participation, please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. We have a Slack channel dedicated to this session. So I'll be monitoring that for questions that we'll take during the Q&A and discussion section at the end of the presentations. And you can also request to, you can raise your hand using the Zoom features. For today's session, we're going to get through a lot of different very, very interesting presentations. So I think the best thing to do is going to be to reserve all questions and comments towards the end of the session. If you'd like to write them down in the Slack channel so you remember what you want to ask, please feel free to do that, and I'll bring them to the speaker's attention at the end. Next slide, please. So we have an amazing lineup for today's session. Myself and Riley will just give a quick intro for the motivation of the session, and then we'll be hearing remotely from Sara Bonito and Sabina, who will talk about their work in accessibility, and Sara will be talking about a little bit about the LSST Discovery Alliance grants and some of the things that are facilitating this work. And we have other speakers, Shar, Riley, John Franklin, and Andres Plazas, who are going to be talking about their projects in accessible astronomy. And as I mentioned before, we're going to leave open discussion and questions and answers for the end of the talk. I do believe Shar has to leave early, so if you have any questions specifically for them, please just note them in the chat and they can get back to those questions as soon as possible. That also might be true for Sara and Sabina, since it's quite late where they're both located, so we want to respect their time, but I encourage discussion even after the session ends in the Slack channel. Next slide, please. So I just want to take a few minutes to introduce the motivation for the session, and firstly, I wanted to find the word jamboree. I don't know its complete etymology, but a jamboree basically is a large celebration or party that could be lavish or boisterous. Its second definition is a large rally of scouts, so we're going to ignore that definition for our purposes. But I wanted to throw a jamboree for all of these amazing projects that are happening in the Rubin ecosystem with respect to making astronomy more accessible. And as you'll see from our amazing speaker lineup, there's a lot of different contexts for what accessible astronomy and accessible research, how it's interpreted. So our goals for this session are, of course, to establish this common space and help people make connections and branch out into accessibility work. I hope that we can establish maybe an annual celebration or, space at future workshops for accessible astronomy. We want to establish this common resource and Rubin space for accessibility work. And of course, we want to honor and celebrate the work that's already ongoing so we can initiate more conversations for funding and of course, resource allocation. Riley, do you have anything you'd like to add to our introduction?
Yeah, so I think the only extra thing I'd like to add is something I learned about this topic when I had an opportunity to attend an accessibility workshop at the Space Telescope Science Institute a while back. And I had the opportunity to talk with a lot of subject matter experts in the field of scientific accessibility in science. And I think the thing I really took away from it was that too often in these like very large scientific projects, accessibility considerations are considered an afterthought, not part of the core design of the project. And so I think this type of showcasing these projects in the lead up to all of the science that Ruben will do is really important. But yeah, that's it for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that addition. And I wholeheartedly agree with you that it's very important to give equal space and elevate this work. Can we change slide, please? So our first speaker will be Sara Bonito. So I'd like to pass the microphone over to her and allow her to introduce herself and her talk today.
Thank you. I'm Sara Bonito. I'm a staff researcher at the Observatory of Palermo in Italy, one of the observatories of the Italian National Institute for Astrophysics, INAF, and my pronouns are she, her. I will talk today about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in LSST, in particular on the Trans and Variable Star Science Collaboration, and some opportunities in this LSST Discovery Alliance on accessibility. Next slide, please. Thank you. I am co-chairing Trans and Variable Star Science Collaboration together with Igor Andreoni. That's why I will focus more on the activities on accessibility on the point of view of Trans and Variable Star Science Collaboration. And you can find additional information on the science collaboration using this QR code down here or the YouTube channel and the website. Next slide, please. In the past, a program led by Rachel Street, the former co-chair of TVS, Preparing for Astrophysics with LSST program, allowed us to have grants to support initiatives that are focused on inclusion and accessibility. In fact, in 2021, Ising Simon Foundation awarded $900,000 to enable astronomers to use work to be prepared for future Rubin data. And I will just like to highlight some of them, whose focus was on accessibility. One led by Federica Bianco was on the topic of sonification, and Riley will present more details on this. Another program by Nino Cucchiara and collaborators who were focusing on mentoring for historical Black colleges and minority serving institutes. And a group focusing on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion that myself and Federica was representing in a proposal, was awarded grants to organize with the external collaborators, professional external collaborators, DEI training courses for all the members of science collaborations, and 3D tactile models development of astrophysical objects were proposed by myself with Laura Venuti, and later Sabina will talk more also on this program. Next slide, please. So the first one I will briefly highlight here, but I suggest you see Sabina's talk later on during this session. That one topic that Trans and Variable Star Science Collaboration were focusing on and related to accessibility of scientific results was a project on 3D models and printed kits for a more inclusive science with Ruby and LSST. This will enhance accessibility of the scientific results of complex astrophysical objects that will be investigated with future Rubin data. We started by young stars and star-forming regions for this program to enhance accessibility to blind and visually impaired students and researchers. And after that, a new subgroup of TVS, data visualization and characterizations, was founded and is now active in Transcendent Variable Star Science collaboration. And again, Sabina will provide more details on that. Next slide, please. Another talk that you will see later during this session is by Shar, and they will talk about a mentor training program that is coordinated by Shar and has received grants by the LSST Discovery Alliance Inclusive Collaboration Program. And this is one of the main topics of the subgroup of TVS, focused on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And in the next slide, please. You can see that this is in the context of LSST Discovery Alliance opportunities that you can check in the website. This is a screenshot of the LSST Discovery Alliance. I suggest you to check the programs. Here you can find a list of that. And in the next slide, you can see some more details like fellowship grant opportunity or a Catalyst grant, a summer student program. Some of these students are there in presence during this workshop, and inclusive collaboration initiatives like the one that funded the program that Shar will present during their talk. And in the next slide, you will see also, thank you, that you can check in the website or LSST Discovery Alliance that a child care support program is ongoing. And this enhances accessibility, once again, in my opinion, because it can be a crucial opportunity for people to attend international meetings using this childcare support. In the next slide, you can find some additional information on the Institute members of LSST Discovery Alliance and the contact points, if you would like to have additional information. In the next slide, please. You can see, I will show you, and I hope I can make you also hear a sonification of an accretion burst light curve in young stellar objects. And Riley will talk more about the sonification program, but what I would like to just show you briefly is that usually we decide to convert a table that you see here in this plot, in this screenshot, into a visual plot like this one, an accretion burst. But if you can convert this into sound, you can hear it. And I hope that if you can just try and go for the sonification button.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and hit play on this here.
Okay, thank you. Does this? Okay, I don't hear it.
Yeah,
And,
it's a little quiet in the room.
yeah. I don't know whether I can share. I can try and share the sound.
Do you want to go ahead and try and play it on your end? But if not, it's I just want to let everyone know that these slides are available on the meeting website.
Yeah.
Check them out.
If you prefer, I just would like to highlight that if you will try and hear this sonification, you will recognize a very easily the presence of a burst of a peak from this table, even if you don't want to use the visualization of that. But in the next slide, so okay, you will have the sonification in the slide if you will come back to that. In the next slide, please, you can see that what we have done is to convert the table into music. And next slide, please. This can be performed live. We have done this for an Italian television show. I was playing with my cello the light curve of an accretion burst in a young star. And in the next slide, yes, I will conclude now just saying that also all the other science collaborations have a liaison for the diversity, equity, and inclusion, the I Council at the level of LSST. You can find all the names here, thanks to the chair, Will Clarkson, coordinating this council. And in the next slide, which is the last one, I will also like to advertise that I suggest you to check in the LSST Slack the channel inclusion, where many people organize a discussion on TED Talks with topics of interest. These are just a few of them we have discussed in the past, meeting one per month to discuss these very interesting and important topics. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sara. Next, we'd like to introduce Sabina. Sabina, would you like to take over and talk about your subject today?
Hello, everyone. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Sara, for the introduction. I'm Sabina Ustamujic. I also work in INAF Osservatorio Astronomico, National Observatory of Palermo, together with Sara. I'm also part of the Transient Variable Stars Science Collaboration, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Data Visualization and Representation Subgroup, together with Sally McFarlane. Basically, the group was created the last year, in 2022. And we decided to create this group because it was a great interest about we saw that there was quite an interest about these topics in the meeting we had in Transient Variable Stars. So we decided to start with this group to have a place to discuss in particular about these topics. The activities we do is to promote and investigate the use of different ways of representing and visualization, of representing data, which is more accessible than visualization, because of course we want to include also the visually impaired people. The topics we discuss are about data sonification, for example, digital domes, virtual reality, and 3D printed models. We have also a Slack channel which you can read here if you are interested in knowing more, where we share like some discussions and we organize meetings. And here I'm going to focus on the part of 3D printed models, which is a project that I have been working on the last years together with Sara. Next slide, please. So you can start the video here, please. Basically, I want to illustrate this with an example about how it's important how we represent and visualize the data to communicate what we want to say, and we want to share the science that we want to explain to people. And this is a quite challenging task, because we have to think about which is our target, and which is the best way to represent this. So here you can visualize, for example, a very simple model without a lot of colors of young stellar object with an accretion disk around, where you can see also the lines of the magnetic field lines around. And we can think about possible ways of representing this to communicate to different targets. Next slide, please. So, for example, if we want to share a more scientific representation where our target is in general specialized scientists, we try to represent very accurately the physical phenomenon you observe here. So this is the same model, just changing the way that we are visualizing the data. Next slide, please. Instead, if, for example, our target is, because we also sometimes we want to share and communicate with people that are not inside our field, for example, just for example, this public dissemination. And in that case, we try to make more artistic representation, just to represent the essential facts in an appealing way, just to try to gain the interest of the people that it's listening to us. Next slide, please. In the same way, for example, if we want to explain what is a young star and accretion disk to students, for example, in education, sometimes we want to have a model where we summarize very specific characteristics of our accretion disk. For example, you see that here we included the temperature, the different parts that we can have in an accretion disk, etc. In order to be able to explain to the students what we are observing here. Next slide, please. And this is the important part for the accessibility. I want to focus my part on this part, because we have been, all the models you have seen here have been developed in the Astronomical Observatory of Palermo. The models you have seen here in particular were developed by Salvatore Orlando. And at one point, after having these models, we of course realized that we talk always about data visualization, but there is people that cannot visualize these models, for example, visually impaired people. So the way of including and making available these models to them is to create 3D printable objects that can be touched and you know, in order to discover what we are seeing. Next slide, please. So what we did with this, we had a bunch of models already in Palermo, and we created some use from scratch. Also, what we did is to adapt the models we have to convert them to 3D printable objects. In that case, they can be shared with all the community, and they can be accessible to all the people. So the work we did here was supported by an LSST Kickstarter grant, Young Stellar Objects and the Variability Rubin LSST, combining observations and 3D models for a more inclusive science. It was the principal investigators are Sara Bonito and Laura Venuti, and I have been working on these models. And actually, we created some models, and we are planning to continue doing that, because this is a very transversal activity. Our activity was focused on young stellar objects, but the same methods can be applied to other objects, for example, also to other science. Just is to rethink which is the best way to communicate the science using models in order to arrive to all the people. And we have these models that we already developed. We are planning to do new models in the future, and of course to have them available for the people that they want to download, and we want also to prepare with the models using a 3D printer that we already have in-house, and we are starting to test in order to also develop the 3D printed kits in order to have prepared the models to when we are trying to explain something when we do the activities, having the models that people can touch and can understand when we are trying to communicate to them. And that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Sabina, for that great talk.
welcome.
I would next like to call Shar to present. Shar, are you present? I am. Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Shar, and I'm going to talk to you about a mentor training program, which was kindly funded by a grant from the LSST Discovery Alliance, like Sarah was talking about. So I don't have to convince you all about the importance of mentorship for the career trajectory and retention of junior scientists. And I probably also don't have to convince you that just because someone knows how to do science, that doesn't automatically mean that they know how to mentor other scientists. Mentoring is a skill that must be learned. And actually a lot of research has gone into how to mentor effectively and how to train effective mentors. But most academic institutions don't have that structure in place and aren't necessarily keeping up to date with the research on how to mentor effectively. And also, mentorship especially matters for marginalized scientists. I want to highlight this excellent report from the Keimer Center, which is the Center for Improvement in Mentored Experiences in Research. So basically exactly what we care about. That basically concluded that recognizing and responding to cultural diversity can contribute to mentors' effectiveness. And there's an urgent need to build this capacity in research mentors. And their study is great. I won't read out the quote. So what are we doing to address this? So the Transient Variable Star Science Collaboration is actually sending 3 mentors to the Keimer Center, the place that wrote that study I was just referencing. They have a train the trainer mentoring workshop. So basically they will take our participants and they will teach them not only how to be mentors, but also how to train other mentors to be mentors. They have a comprehensive curriculum that you can find out more about on their website. And then those mentors will come back to us and host virtual trainings for the Rubin community in the next 2 years. So we have solicited applications. We've chosen the people to send to that, and that's Sylvia, Alex, and Igor. So don't go after them this week, but then after August, when they get trained on all of this, you'll be hearing from us about how you all and everyone you know can be trained in effective mentoring. And if you want to know more, you can come talk to me. We have a website, and I'll keep that brief, but thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Shar. Next, Riley, would you like to share your content?
Sure thing. Hi, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what is data sonification, and why are we interested in being able to provide alternative representations to the data that Rubin will observe. So for context, sonification is the practice of giving an audible representation to information and processes. So of course, visualizations are ubiquitous in science. Visualizations are the primary way that scientists interact with the data. But sonifications can provide a potentially useful alternative to complement data visualizations and enhance interpretability. But in order to successfully convey that information, both visualizations and sonifications need to be systematic, reproducible, and avoid distorting the data. And you need to consider the way in which the properties of the data are matched to the properties of the sound. So as part of an LSSD Kickstarter grant, me and my advisor, Federica Bianco, worked with Dr. Christine Lim, Jindaya Wells, and Paranmi Adepoju from Lincoln University near Oxford, Pennsylvania, which is the first degree granting historically Black college and university in the US. And Dr. Christine Lim and Jindaya Wells are actually music experts. And so they really helped us in taking some of the early sonifications of the Rubin data that we were creating and introducing methods to make them more memorable and adding a musical foundation and orchestration to the sonifications. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about how we map Rubin data to the Rubin data parameters to the sound parameters. And the data set we were using was the plastics data set, which is a simulation, a 3-year simulation of the Rubin survey. And so first of all, both light curves and music are both time series. They're both things that change in time. So the time axis naturally gives a common baseline to the two representations. And then next we decided that the flux could be matched to the pitch of the note. So higher flux values would be represented by a higher note in the octave. We also decided to inversely map the uncertainty of the photometric measurement to the volume of the notes, such that more precise measurements are emphasized by louder notes and less precise measurements are de-emphasized in the volume space. And finally, the Rubin data is not one-dimensional. There are 6 filters, and we designed software that can sonify all 6 filters simultaneously and map each passband to a different MIDI track, and thereby they can be each represented by a different MIDI instrument. So you'll see when I show the next slide how each of the UGRIZY filters are mapped to a particular instrument in this representation. And there's a bunch of other potential mappings that I'm showing in this diagram by the dotted lines, just to represent that there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different sound parameters that can be mapped to the data parameters. And I'm not even showing all of the metadata that's present in the plastics data set either. So there's a lot of space for experimentation in this mapping. And the last property I want to talk about is the last musical property I want to talk about is the drone. And so this is a concept that was introduced to us by our collaborators at Lincoln University. And when we showed them these early sonifications, their initial thoughts were that there needed to be a kind of a foundation to the orchestration because of the gaps, the time gaps in the plastics light curves. There were these like periods of silence where nothing was being played at all. And so their suggestion was we can fill that kind of missing foundation with a drone. So a common example of a drone in music is the bagpipes, where one of the pipes just plays like a constant single note that the melody of the pipes is played on top of. So this adds like a foundation to the musical score. But then for us on the astronomy side, we know that any musical implementation that we add has to be mapped to an actual astrophysical parameter. Otherwise, the mapping doesn't make sense. So we decided that the closest thing we could think of to mapped a drone to was the phase of the moon at Cerro or at Cerro-Pachán. So when I play the sonification, you might be able to hear this kind of warbling, sinusoidal, low-pitched sound that is actually oscillating with the phase of the moon at the site. Okay, so this, I'm just going to show an example of one of the sonifications that we created. And this particular object is a type 1bc supernova in the plastics data set. And each color here is mapped to a particular filter. And then in the legend in the upper left, you can see which MIDI instrument that filter has been mapped to. So for UGRIZY, it's the clarinet, trumpet, violin, cello, French horn, and the tinkle bell. And then we're also showing what note each flux value is being mapped to on the right-hand side. So let me go ahead and try to play this. I think the first part got cut off a little bit. Let me play one more time and see if you can hear when the supernova event kind of in the middle of the light curve happens. Okay, so yeah, so this is kind of cute, I think, but I wanna make it clear that I think that going from this kind of sonification and orchestration of multiband photometry, going from that to a tool that is actually useful that can enhance accessibility in science, I think there's still a long way to go. And the reason is because sonification of data is an intrinsically interdisciplinary science. And I think if you're going to make a tool that is going to make data available to especially the blind and visually impaired community, you absolutely need to collaborate with subject matter experts in auditory perception and psychology, and of course, get feedback from focus groups of the blind and visually impaired community. Otherwise, there's not much point in trying to make a tool to provide a service for that community. Okay, so I think that's all I want to say about Rubin Rhapsodies. It is available on a GitHub repository that you can install. I'm working on making it a fully published package on PyPI right now. So stay tuned for that. That I think I'll wrap it up there.
Thank you so much, Riley. Next, I'd like to ask for John Franklin, if they're in the room, to present your presentation.
I think the mic will come through there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. I'm John Franklin. I'm a graduate student at University of Washington, and I'm also on the EDI committee for the desk collaboration. So I want to talk about some of the stuff we've been doing recently. We've been doing a lot of things like developing guidelines for meetings and conversations on Slack, but one of the big things we did recently was develop a more expansive set of resources to help people when they come to our desk meetings. So the context here is that conference travel presents a lot of barriers and maybe even dangers for marginalized communities, or marginalized can mean any variety of things, right? Basically, traveling and attending a meeting is not as easy and safe for every single person in your collaboration. And it might be even more so for people who are not present in your collaboration. That's a barrier instead of joining. And so this is, a lot of people have been discussing this recently. A really good source on this is reading this essay, "The Whole Thing is Unsafe" by Professor Chanda Prescott-Weinstein. They are a member of DESK. They're at Amherst. They do like axion cosmology kind of things, but they're also a respected scholar in the humanities as well. And a big point made in this essay is that, in recent years, for example, as some states implement laws that are unsafe for queer people, especially trans people, there's been discussions of like, oh, should we not hold meetings in this state, for example? And there's a recognition of the fact that, that's important, but the fact that we're just now having these conversations is kind of pointing out the fact that in the past, other places have not been safe for other communities, and we're kind of making choices about which communities we're prioritizing when we make these decisions about where to hold our meetings. And so you might guess from the title of this essay, "The Whole Thing is Unsafe," is one of the big theses of this is there's nowhere in the world that you can hold a meeting that's safe for everyone to attend your meeting. And so the idea is not to say, oh, well, I guess we can't do anything about this, right? It's to recognize this, make this kind of explicit, not subtext, but explicit text, and try to provide as much resources and be as honest as you can about these dangers and try to address those if you can. So our goal is to provide expansive safety and accessibility resources for all of future DESK meetings. And this started at the most recent July DESK meeting we had in the city of Zurich. And these resources are meant to cover issues that occur both inside and outside the meeting context, and include harassment and violence from conference attendees, which is often things that we do address when we hold meetings, but also address things that can happen from random people that you might encounter on the street, and also from state authorities. Especially like trans folk, people of color, they face a danger from state authorities in ways that white cis straight people don't. And if we want these people to travel to our meetings and kind of enter out into this dangerous world, that we need to be aware of these dangers and kind of aid them if we can. And so at this last meeting, we provided resources that included emergency phone numbers, information on general health care in Switzerland, the access to reproductive care in Zurich and Switzerland, mental health resources, accessibility concerns for physical disabilities, ways to handle instances of racism and anti-LGBTQIA plus discrimination, and kind of information for first generation and low income students who might not have as much experience kind of traveling for business like this, especially in academia where you tend not to get refunded until months afterwards. So you kind of have to bear that front. And so here, if you want, there's a list, there's a link to all of the resources exactly as provided them, but I thought I would share one of these instances. So here's what we listed for the topic of race and racism. So it says, if you encounter racism at the DESK meeting, consider consulting with and reporting to the incident to the MCPs. So that's just our meeting contact people we have. I'm one of them at the Rubin meeting. If you experience racism outside the meeting, for example, from random people or state authorities, you can still go to the MCPs for help. In addition, the city of Zurich has counseling centers that provide free confidential advice for responding to racist incidents, and there's a link to that. The Swiss Federal Commission Against Racism also has an online reporting service that you may wish to use. There's a link for that. In case you don't feel comfortable turning to state authorities, consider contacting the Swiss Advice Network for Victims of Racism. There's a link. You may also find it helpful to review this guide on interacting with police and responding to racist incidents provided by the Swiss Alliance Against Racial Profiling. So here's an example of the kinds of things that we try to provide. Obviously, DESK is an international science collaboration. There are things we can do and things we can't do. The goal here is to make it clear that we understand that there are issues like this that exist in the world, and kind of lower the barrier to people to attend, to say like, if you attend and you encounter these issues, we've done some of the legwork for you. We're trying to make it easy for you to find the resources you need to be safe and respond. Because if you're the victim of any kind of harassment, often that makes it hard for you to go and advocate for yourself. And so we want to kind of preemptively advocate for you. And so again, we include very similar resources for all these kinds of things. We're going to try to do this for all of our upcoming meetings, starting with our sprint week coming this fall. In the winter, we have or I should say in February, we have an online meeting. And so we're starting to think about what kinds of resources do we need to provide for online meetings, because some of these things you probably don't need, but there are probably things that aren't included here that are specific to online meetings. So if you have thoughts on any of these things, I'd love to talk to you about it. I'd also encourage, Ruben and any other groups that you're in to consider start providing resources like this to make our meetings as accessible as we can. Thanks. Any questions?
Thank you so much for your talk, John Franklin. Our last speaker today is Andres Plazas. Andres, would you like to present your presentation?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, thank you, Alysha and everyone. My name is Andres Plazas Malagón, and I work as a Rubin operations scientist at Slack. I'm within the Rubin community. I'm part of the community science team, and I'm also involved in the Dark Energy Science collaboration. So in these few minutes, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the activities that we have been doing within the context of the community science team and also within DESK. Last year, I gave a similar talk on these topics. So there's going to be considerable overlap. It's kind of a follow-up on that talk, and then see how these activities, see the status of these activities. So one of the things that we have been trying to do within the community science team is to study the accessibility of Jupyter notebooks. As many of you know, the Rubin Science Platform is a central tool for the Rubin community to access the LSST data. And one of the aspects of this RSP, Rubin Science Platform, is the Jupyter Notebook. However, if you do a little bit of research, you realize that they're kind of intrinsically not accessible. For example, if you have a screen reader, because of the cell format and how the notebooks are developed. So there are certain ways that you can do to make them a little bit more accessible. One of them is, for example, to add the tutorials in different formats, like a static page, HTML, or provide the same information in something that is pure code or command line tutorials. That's also better for people who use screen readers. So these are some of the things that we have been implementing with the notebooks. We recently, we've also been studying the inclusion of Jupyter extensions to the notebooks in order to make them more accessible. So this internally within the community, within Rubin and the community science team, we have these documents or technical notes. One of them is called the Rubin Technical Note 045. And I think I just added a link to many of these documents. And I guess in the most recent version of the slides, you can find it. But this is fine. I just wanted to point out that there are more links in the most recent version of the slides. But then, as I was saying, we have the tutorials. We have guidelines that are internal for use of the team. And then we have included the guidelines in order to try to make our tutorials more accessible. One of them is trying to make sure that every image that we have, every plot that we have has alt test description. So we did research to find some guidelines to find the best way of writing those alternative text descriptions. At the same time, recently, we've been looking into different color palettes that take into account color deficiencies. It's not like it's not a trivial problem, but it is important, of course. And we have found out that it's not like one solution for everything. One of the most important suggestions that can be done is don't rely only on color to convey information. I guess that's one of the main things that we have found while doing this research. So that's still in progress, and I actually, in the most recent version of the slides, I put a link to the Rubin Community Forum, where I have been asking for the input of the Rubin community on this. And I also wanted to point out that the Rubin Community Forum is there for everyone in this community to also put their resources and their questions and their contributions to any topic, in particular topics of accessibility. There is a category on on inclusion, and we should try to make use more of that tool. Okay, along the lines of accessibility with Jupyter Notebooks, we hosted an accessible notebooks hackathon. So within the Rubin community science team, we do these Rubin assemblies every week, every other week. We talk about the tutorials and the notebooks that we have for the different types. Currently, the simulations that we have, DP 0.2, DP 0.3. Within one of these sessions, we contacted our colleagues from the Space Telescope Science Institute that have been doing a lot of work regarding the improvement of accessibility in Jupyter Notebooks. So we hosted one of these hackathons. This is recorded. You can look it up in our channel. This session that has recommendations, authoring notebooks recommendations in order to make your notebooks more accessible. As Riley and others have explained, we've also been looking into data sonification and providing examples. I've been trying the focus that I've been trying to look at is trying to get this work in the Rubin Science platform. So I've been looking at a software called Astronify that is also developed by the Space Telescope Science Institute personnel. There have been some type of problems installing things and audio libraries. So that's still a work in progress that I hope to get working. And I would like also to explore other type of code, like, for example, the code used in Rubin Rhapsodies. And hopefully maybe in the future, we can maybe to avoid relying on third-party code, and if we can find code that is open source, that a lot of this code is open source, and trying to include the code, the core classes or modules that are doing the sonification and the mapping, and try to put it as part of the code of the Rubin Science pipelines. Maybe not the LSST Science pipelines, but part of the community science team is developing a Python module in which we could include that. Next slide, please. So throughout these investigations and talking with, again, with our colleagues from the Space Telescope Science Institute, there have been a lot of emphasis on the need of having focus groups and involving people with disabilities while we do this development. And this is one of the things that we've been trying to move forward. So they gave us a contact of the people that help them find, for example, blind and visually impaired developers. So we find that there is a group called Glass Education. Actually, there's a typo. It's a Geneva Lake and STEM. But this is a group, an example of a group that they were contacted by the Space Telescope Science Institute, and they gave them a list of contacts of developers with disabilities that gave them feedback, and then did focus groups in order to see if the implementations, if the guidelines that they were implementing to improve accessibility were actually working or not. We're trying to do this within Rubin. This wasn't, at the beginning, this wasn't part of the budget or something like that, but we have been able to talk to the Rubin leadership, and they've been very open to provide the funding for this type of consultation services, which is good. So currently we're talking with the team that develops the Rubin Science platform to identify the areas in which we could use this external consulting. Another area in which we have been working on is to try to reduce language barriers for people for whom English is not their first language, who use English as a second language, especially in academia. You may have noticed that some of the tutorials have already been translated to Spanish. This was part of an international contribution, in-kind contribution from the Argentinian group. We also hired, we also translated the Rubin glossary and acronyms to Spanish. We also hired a company to help us do that. And it was a joint effort between Rubin and this company. And also recently, we made use of one of these grants from the LSST Discovery Alliance and the Heisen Simons Foundation. One of the calls, especially the call on inclusive collaboration and policies and best practices. And we got a little grant to do a literature research to provide recommendations to overcome language barriers in the Rubin Observatory. So it's not a lot of money, it's not a lot of work, but we plan to produce a document that hopefully has recommendations for people to apply directly, but also perhaps for Rubin or the science collaborations to follow up. If, for example, we need to hire workshops to better to write in English and academic English or something like that, because studies have shown that that helps. This is the type of recommendations that we've been looking at, that hopefully we can deliver at the end of the conclusion of this project, this grant. Next slide, please. So finally, I wanted to say a little bit more about the work in which I've been involved in the Dark Energy Science collaboration. So currently I am part of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee as John Franklin. But previously, I've had the chance to be part of the organizing committees of some of the meetings that have happened, in particular the one at SLAC, the desk committee meeting at SLAC. And this is, when I was found myself in this meeting, then they told me, why don't you help us with the meeting accessibility subcommittee? And this is, every time I'm in these committees and in these things, I try to think about what could we do, thinking about the lines of what we call the spheres of influence, which in Rubin we talked about it a few years ago, and you can find more about that in the Rubin community if you Google spheres of influence. But being in one of these committees, what can we do? So we brought up, for example, the topic of access for foreign nationals, which at SLAC is not a trivial thing. And I'm glad I did not participate in the organization of this Rubin community workshop, but I'm glad that they figured it out and there are no restrictions for anybody. And I know that that's not a trivial thing. So that's a thing that always needs to be brought up. Also, a few years ago during the pandemic, I happened to be the chair of the meetings committee, and I told them we should have a form for requesting accommodations. For example, live captioning or whatever disability accommodations that people may need. And I'm happy that this was already included into policy of the committee and it moved on. I'm not the chair of the committee anymore, but this is something that is still done in the collaboration. Also, when I was in this meeting, we asked about all gender bathrooms as SLAC, and then you find out all the bureaucracy and what it have been done and what it hasn't been done. There are all gender bathrooms in the Kavli building, as you know, but they tell me that progress is still very slow to go to other parts of SLAC. But this is another topic that is important and that needs to be brought into account. In addition to the topic of safety that John Franklin just told us about, this is something that we also discussed during that time. So we added also recommendations for presenters in the guidelines document. For example, you should use a font that has high contrast, that is big, which I did not do in this slide, and sorry for that. I think I changed that for the most recent version of the slides. But things like this, like you can find guidelines online that can tell you how you can make your presentation more accessible, trying to define the acronyms and stuff like that. There are also topics on physical accommodation to access as SLAC. So in the United States, there are laws related to the Americans with Disabilities Act, but it's also important to lay out explicitly the wheelchair accessibility instructions, for example. And another thing that we found out is we asked if we could have American Sign Language interpreters, or if not, at least captioning services, some live captioning services. In the end, SLAC provided the live captioning services for Zoom live captioning. And this is something that if you're in an institution, a lot of the times I've realized that many of these institutions, they have the resources that you could use. And then they provide it. Sometimes it's not at cost. And yes, there are limited resources, but this is something that people can ask and something that could be offered when preparing a meeting. Just to finalize, one of the most recent things that we have done, or that I tried to propose, is to rename the EDI committee to have accessibility explicitly included in there, and it might be a small change, but the motivation is to make it like kind of codified or make it part of the explicit charge. So when I move on from this committee, this is something that's still there in the collaboration and is part of the official policy of the collaboration to actually track metrics on accessibility, hire experts or find funding to hire experts, and it's something that is explicitly in there. So this is something that we're currently discussing, and it might seem like a small change, but I think it's important as well. That's it for my part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andres. I'd like to advance the slide. Yeah, firstly, I want us to thank our speakers, all of them today, for putting together this amazing session. So thank you so much. We have plenty of time for questions or discussion. And Riley, if you can identify anyone who has a question in the room, I have one question on Slack that I can bring to attention.
Okay, yeah. So we have a couple questions in the room. So why don't we go ahead and start with Sierra?
Yeah, so it's going to be a question and a comment because I'm that sort of monster, I guess. The quick comment is I want to make it really clear to everyone that this is not something that is theoretical. So like when we talk about the desk resources for like dangers of various meetings and how to address them, that's really not a theoretical situation. Even at the Rubin meetings back in Tucson, we would regularly have issues with people of color being harassed because Tucson's not a perfect place, to say the least. It's a liberal bastion in a red state, but So just really keep in mind that this is not a theoretical situation. There are scientists actively being harmed in our communities due to lack of resources. It's really valuable to keep that in mind. And I forgot my second point. I'll remember it eventually. So
Okay, we can come back. Maybe, yeah.
Let someone else go.
Do we want to go to a Zoom question, Alysha?
Sure. Actually, my question comes from that was posted in the Slack channel, and this was a question for Riley. So the question comment is, thanks for your presentation and sonification demo. I don't know how much about what works and doesn't work in this domain, but in your example of a supernova light curve, I immediately wished the track included a metronome style time or bar click, maybe one click for each day or each week or similar. Have you tried this maybe and it wasn't good? Question mark.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting suggestion. And it brings up a really good point about a parameter that actually we haven't really mapped to a data parameter, which is actually the tempo of the track, like the actual beats per minute of the track. I think when we made the sonification, we set it to just a tempo that would be easy to listen to, you know, not too fast, not too slow, so you can present it quickly. But I think that suggestion is absolutely legitimate, and that it's certainly feasible that the tempo of the track could be parameterized to perhaps, like the comment suggested, like every month or week, and just whatever, you know, something that maintains the listenability of the track, and adding a metronome like beat is a great idea. So yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that suggestion. Maybe we can take another question from the room. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my name is Prentice Jackson. I'm the DEI manager for Newer Labs. So I'm happy to be here. I wanted to, like Alysha said, really give kudos to this team. A lot of great information here, especially as it relates to race, as it relates to the LGBTQ community. The question I had was for Sara. I'm very interested in resources and information. You talked about the historically Black colleges and the grant that was from that, and also DEI training in your presentation. So where can I find those resources? Is it where can I find out more information, or is it something I need to follow up with you about?
Yes, thank you for the question. That program was awarded by grants of Kickstarter program a couple of years ago. So that program now is no longer active, and this is one big issue has been already emphasized, but I would like to stress this more, that of course funds are needed for these kind of activities. In the case, the program was to pair a mentor from the science collaborations of Rubin LSST. In my case, I was one of the mentors from Trans and Variable Star Science collaboration with the faculty student pair from Historical Black College, and the faculty student pair were receiving a summer salary. We asked this grant to make them have the summer salary to be more engaged in the activity of Rubin LSST, the Rubin Science Platform, the Data Preview Zero. The team I was working with is now among the Data Preview Zero delegates and are members of TVS. So the way that program was planned and organized was to provide them information on the Rubin LSST ecosystem and a scientific topic on which working for a workshop of 1 week, and then to engage them in the activities of Rubin LSST science collaboration. That was a pilot program by Nino Cucchiara, and also Darren Norman and has talked on the details last year during the PCW plenary session of last year. I suggest to check out also the recording on that contribution, and also there is a document explaining. I can provide links, of course. Maybe I can add that at the slide deck to my slide as a note, so it will be available.
Okay, thank you. What about the training part of it? I know that the DEI training that you talked about there was 2 sections, one about the historical black colleges, and then there was the other section about DEI training. Is that also a resource that
Yeah, for the training on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have asked for grants to pay external professional on these topics. They served the science collaboration members with 2 different courses, and unfortunately, and as far as they are professional on this, there is no recording on that. They asked us not to record the training session because these courses, we paid for these courses, and of course there should be new grants to reactivate that. So there is no recording on resources available for that. I can again, also for this, I can provide a link to the organization that we have contacted, and of course, if there is interest on that, please let us know. We have a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion subgroup on Trans and Variable Stars science collaborations. I am chairing this subgroup, and if there is again interest in that, we will try and ask again for grants if there is, if there will be future opportunities to organize again this kind of courses.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions from the room? If not, I have a question for Sabina, if you'd like to unmute. I was curious about the 3D representations that you showed. I was wondering if there had been any feedback that you received from the students that used those tactile representations, and what sort of feedback you got from the students.
Well, actually, we have a very good feedback about the models I have shown in virtual reality. But what we are missing for now is the feedback on the 3D printed models, because we weren't able yet to test this part. We were able to buy a 3D printer, which we were missing when I started with the project. So now we have the 3D printer to being able to print these objects. We have some feedback actually in some with some objects that were printed which are not part of this project, because were printed with but some external sources. And that was very useful for students when we went there. Now we are able also to print our objects, the objects we designed. So we are expecting to do it soon with the printer we bought, and to start using them. What will be really interesting, and as Andres told in his presentation, is also to know the feedback for the people that they really need this model, so visually impaired people. Because we have tested the models with students in when we have done some events to talk about science with the students, also with adults that want to know more, but they are not scientists, so it was for dissemination purposes, and they were really happy and really interested in both things, virtual reality and also in touching the models, because there is like a different perception that you gain when you have the model in your hands and you can touch it and discover the little things about the model, and the thing of the virtual reality. There are different approaches that I think that they are complementary and they are very good in both ways. But we are trying also to, and actually Sara has done some also has been informing about that she has been trying also to talk with some local communities of visually impaired people in order to be able to when we will have these models to talk with the people and see if actually their models are well designed for them, or if we are missing something and we should improve something. So this is, I think, that part I think that is really important, because we as not blind people, we design the models thinking in the way that they should be discovered, but sometimes we can miss some details that make the model not perfect for visually impaired people. So that's something that we are planning to do in the near future.
That's a great point. Thanks, Sabina. Okay. Alysha, are there any more questions online?
Not that I can tell, but of course, if anyone thinks of anything, they can continue to use this channel throughout the week and contact the specific speakers they'd like to continue to the discussion. And Sarah, I've opened up the slides again, so if you'd like to include links or add a slide to include references so we can share that with Prentice, that would be great. Are there any more questions in the room?
It doesn't look like it.
So I have one of these questions, and these are things that I thought up to invite our speakers to share their thoughts on. And the first question I actually took from Dara Norman's book on accessibility. There's a really good chapter on accessibility written there, and the author presents these questions. So I'd like to ask our speakers today, what does it mean when we make the claim that the future should be accessible?
I guess I can take a shot at it, maybe. I think I would kind of go back to like what I said at the beginning and reiterate that, you know, accessibility concerns shouldn't be thought of as an afterthought. So when we make the claim that the future should be accessible, it means that we're making preparations for accessibility in the run-up to a project like Rubin. And so that we're thinking about these things ahead of time rather than trying to implement them kind of as you go, or in hindsight, where I think implementing accessibility resources retroactively can be much more difficult than if they are planned ahead of time.
Thank you for your response. Does anyone online want to take an opportunity to respond or think about what your dreams are for the future of your project?
Oh, yeah, we have a comment from the room.
Sorry. So all of these things are great and definitely fall into the category of accessible for accessibility's sake. But one of the things that isn't really talked about a lot in the same kind of vein is ADHD and autistic accessibility. And while I can sit in this room and try very, very hard to listen to people talking and have the ability to do so, the information isn't always absorbing. And so I made a joke the other day about how I wish there was like subtitles for people who were talking, but in a place like this where people do have presentations, yes, there's stuff that you want to read on the slide, but it's not always what everybody is saying. A lot of the time, what you're saying, you want people to listen to more than you want people to read the slide. But if there was like closed captioning at the bottom of the page for somebody who's speaking, that would help me intake the information a lot better than just simply trying to stare at somebody and feeling really awkward about eye contact. Just simple things like that that do require forethought, but aren't always necessarily in the same kind of category when you think about accessibility. So I'd like that in the future.
Yeah, Willow.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Just to add to that, I think like Rubin in particular has gotten a little bit better over the years. Like I think the plenaries used to be 2 hours maybe, or like an hour and a half. The parallel sessions used to be longer, I believe. I think an hour is like the maximum amount of time, 50 minutes. I still think an hour and a half is too long. And I think people perhaps are beginning to take that a little bit more seriously. Maybe it has to do with COVID and being online. Perhaps people recognize that when you're online, or when most of your audience is online and you can't tell if they're paying attention, then you want to make your sessions a little bit shorter so you can try to convince yourself that they're paying attention. But I agree wholeheartedly. I think people who are designing these conferences should maybe take that a little bit more seriously, or in a kinder way, just consider it.
Yep, Sierra, please.
Just a small addition to both of those. I think the best way to think about it is often consider who the most marginalized person in your community could be. And if you work to uplift it so that they have more accessibility, this hypothetical person, it generally helps other people in ways you are not thinking of. Captioning, for example, really good for neurodiverse folk. It was wonderful when we had it at the desk meeting. I wish we did it more. Hybrid accessibility. Yes, it helps, people who can't attend the conference due to financial issues. It helps people who can't attend conferences because they're immunocompromised or have medical disabilities. It's like when we do things to raise accessibility, even along one axis, we tend to help everyone. And so it should really be the highest priority thing on our list if we want to improve things across the board for people.
It also helps people who are burnt out like midday, but still want to participate in learning.
Yeah.
So you have the accessibility of, you can go somewhere else and be not around people, but still absorb stuff.
Great. Do we have any more comments from the room? If not, maybe we have some, yeah, Andreas, perhaps.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say I agree with Sierra. It goes along universal design and how it uplifts everybody if you think about the most vulnerable population in your group. And I think, I don't know, many of us have been spoiled in a way or whatever word you want to use by the privileges, and then we don't see these other voices, these other points of view. And I think it's important to listen to what the experience of other people's are if we want to have astronomy being accessible to everybody. The things are about saying that the conferences should not be too long, for example, the talks, or that we should have closed captioning. In a way, unfortunately, we have to keep saying it all the time and being loud for the people who are organizing these meetings. Because there's a lot of the time there is the selection bias that if nobody says anything, if you ask, sometimes you ask a meeting and then you ask, was this event accessible for you? And then everybody says yes, and then you're happy and then you move on. That doesn't mean that it was accessible, because to begin with, there is a selection bias. You did not make the event accessible to begin with, so a lot of people presumably couldn't participate. So yeah, so we need to say it more often. And I think we've been in Rubin and in other collaborations, we've been opening these channels to say it, but it sucks, right? Because the burden is always on reminding. But it also helps us saying again about the spheres of influence. If you find yourself, there's always an opportunity for us to say something to our colleagues. If you're writing a paper and then you say like, oh, these plots already all use the same color for the same thing. Maybe this is not the best. Or if you're a referee in a journal, you can say that. Or if you're in a meetings committee or whatever, there's always, or if you're mentoring somebody, you can teach your students about thinking about these things to begin with. So putting an emphasis on that. And the other thing is also finding the communities that we're trying to address, paying them, compensating them, like finding experts and saying, okay, this is one of the main worries that I have with the work that we've been doing in the CST that I mentioned. I really want to implement that and have these focus groups and pay people who can develop these things with us and tell us if it's working or not.
All right, I think, Alysha, I don't see any other raised hands in the room. Do you think this is a good time to tie a knot on this session?
I am in agreement. So please feel free to, if you are inspired, to continue this discussion in the chat. We can keep it going for the rest of the week and further. If any of our speakers today have any additional resources they'd like to put on the slides, you can do that before the end of today or tomorrow, and I'll be sure to update them so we can share them widely. If you could advance one slide, I just want to express my gratitude again to everyone who spoke today and everyone who participated in this session. My goal is to create space at Rubin conferences for these kind of talks, so we don't have to necessarily rely on one-to-one interactions to create reminders, but we have ongoing conversations about these projects in any context. Not only data manipulation, but accessibility for people who are already plugged into the project and need additional resources to fully leverage their experience there. So thanks everyone very much again. I can't speak very well. And we'll see you soon. Please let me know if you have any additional questions, and I'll get the updated slides in the channel shortly.
Also, thank you, Alysha, very much for proposing this session.